I always get asked what tools my guests use to build their businesses. What CRM is that? What camera are they using? How do they track their sales? So I did the work for you. I compiled a list of the top 20 tools and resources mentioned by my guests into a free PDF guide. It's the exact tech stack building 7-figure businesses use right now. You can grab it for free. Download the Guest Black Book at go.tronpodcast.com. Stop guessing and start building. Link in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen and listeners of the T.R.O.N podcast, The Randomness of Nothing. Every time I get on the show, I'm very honored and humbled that people took time out of their schedules to be on this platform. And this gentleman epitomizes it. He is an American patriot. He's a Navy veteran, experienced police officer, and now utilizes his skills and knowledge and mentorship he's acquired over his life to train future police officers to be ready to be in academies and be experienced professionals. Frank McGaha, thank you very much, sir.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks again. That's going to be fun.
Man, this is stoked, man. Because like I said, you're when I see a biography like yours, it kind of stops me in my tracks. And this is one of the reasons I made this show, was to talk to people like yourself. So please tell your story.
Yeah, I mean, it's as great as it sounds on paper. You know, for me, it was pretty standard. 18, I enlist in the U.S. Navy. 19, I roll out to boot camp. I went in for U.S. Navy SEAL, and I failed. I failed through it. I broke both legs, compression fractures. I had stress fractures first, healed up, rotated out to Coronado early on in my training, and then broke both legs again. And it was humbling. Thought I was getting sent home with my tail between my legs.
Jeez.
And then you'll hear me say this. I say this all the time. I had a really good mentor. Managed to keep me in, managed to get me into the aviation side of the Navy, where I was a helicopter crew chief for the rest of my career, doing multi-mission platforms, you know, anti-mine warfare, logistics, NSW, whatever mission that they had for us, search and rescue. But it was one of the big key factors where I've learned, you know, most people never go to failure. Most people quit before they get a chance to fail.
Yeah.
And failure, you can really learn a lot about yourself. I mean, after that, I was able to turn myself around. I started training nonstop every day after training and after PT. I would go PT some more. I'd go do some physical training. I'd do soft sand beach runs to strengthen my shins and my legs, so I wouldn't ever get stress fractures again.
That's amazing.
And it just kept growing from there. So ultimately, finished out my time in the Navy. I did 3 deployments over to the Middle East, 2 full-length deployments, 1 short-term tactics deployment. And then I knew I wanted to get out of the military, and I wanted to combine 2 of my passions. One, which was I'm an avid outdoorsman, and then 2, I always wanted to pursue law enforcement. So I said, hey, what's the best way to do that? Yeah. Go become a National Park Service law enforcement ranger.
It's amazing.
I got out, did that, went through the academy. Once I made the sergeant of the academy, and once again, just good leadership, mentorship guided me there. And while I was going through the academy, I was recruited right in the middle of my driver training from my dream agency for my dream position as the backcountry law enforcement ranger in the Smoky Mountain National Park. As I did that for a little bit, yeah, I mean, it really was. It was great. It kind of spoiled me because it was the dream position. Not ideal for a family, but definitely my dream position. After that, I rotated up to D.C. To round out my law enforcement experience, to get more uniform urban law enforcement.
Yeah.
And my career took off. But once again, good leadership, good mentorship. Right. I got my instructorships. And then as my career was winding down, my injuries from the military started catching up with me. Yeah. And I knew I was doing the disservice being out there on the street. You know, I knew that my physical limitations ultimately would hinder my ability to effectively perform on the street. And so I transitioned over into consulting. And after working them out, good mentorship again, we settled on law enforcement prep and then kind of training. And now we're kind of even building it out even farther. I can't go into too much detail what we have coming down the pipeline, but yeah, I mean, it just exploded and we've been blessed since.
Did you see like a gap when you saw that transition from military to the range, the park services to traditional, I'll say, police officer that people see on a day-by-day basis, and then throughout that entire, despite all the having that great mentorship, we're like, man, there's kind of a gap that I think that while it may not be applicable to me, you may have heard it from other people. Like, man, I really could have utilized this. It wouldn't have tripped me up along the way, which is why you got into consulting.
Yeah, so when I went through, I knew no one in law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no background in it. I didn't know anyone who was a law enforcement officer. I was just, as a kid, I always wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of, the big transition was from military to civilian life. That was the biggest thing to wrap my head around. Law enforcement kind of made that a little bit easier because it kind of resembles a paramilitary structure, but it was still a gut punch. I mean, just the way that people would talk or approach, someone that I would consider a very, like, really high rank individual that, I've been trained, hey, you never go to that person directly unless something's burning.
Yeah,
But that was the big thing. And then there was always those learning curves of you think everyone thinks they know what they're getting into, but no one knows until you actually experience it.
I can certainly,
right?
Go ahead. I said I certainly can't relate, which is why I'm listening.
Well, I mean, but you can. I mean, it's the same thing. Going from law enforcement to business. Yeah. I mean, I was like, oh yeah, this is what it's going to be. We didn't start with law enforcement prep and recruiting and things like that. I did general consulting, safety and everything consulting, and then we finally niched down to where we are now. Yeah. And I mean, it could be anything. I went to EMT school, hardest academic school I've ever went through. I have no idea how people become docs. That's ridiculously hard academically. Yeah. But yeah, there was just so much in every time. So whether you're learning how to, like, we're trying to learn how to do a podcast and everything. You never know what you're getting in. Social media.
Yes.
That's a full-time job.
Dude. Oh my goodness. It's like, and for people who don't love doing it, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like the hashtags, the algorithms. You're like, dude, let the 18-year-old like kid that loves to like TikTok in 5 minutes do it, right? Like, but the only way you can get your consulting business out or to reach that next generation of police and law enforcement, everybody had to pivot their business model to say this, I have to do this, right? Like,
if you don't, you're almost just washing down the number one lead.
Oh my God.
That you could have.
Exactly. Like, you had no choice, right? So now it becomes, and people now absorb information in very small bites. So what could have been a 5-minute message, now you have 27 seconds, 15 seconds to get your point across, to get somebody's attention, right? Because that's just the way the world that we live in.
I get dinged on that all the time because we'll make short form and long form content. Yeah. And some of our long form be 20 minutes.
Yes.
They're saying, hey, can you just get to the point? And well, all this is the point, because trust me, if you mess up this previous step to get to this one, you just wasted 6 to 8 months of your life.
And that's real, and so, I think that now, because of the condensed information, you've done a great job, pivoting when it comes to learning that. You're still old enough to have some school knowledge, but you're young enough to like be able to pivot in real time. Now, I love the name of your company. It is Armogan Consulting, and I was like, man, what's the definition of this? And I was scrolling through your website.
Yeah,
it means perfect day to start a new journey, right? And I was like, man,
roughly translated, and it's a 19th. Me being in the Navy, it's an old 19th century naval term. That's what it roughly translates. It's a perfect day to start a new.
And so, can you give us a high overview without giving away details of your future plans? Like, when you transition from, hey, I'm just going to, and I'm summarizing here, giving basic safety 101 understanding of certain situations versus saying I need to make a full-fledged business out of this.
When I decided to leave law enforcement, obviously, I still had a family to take care of. I had a daughter on the way. I knew I had a lot of experience, especially for a younger officer at the point in time. I had a lot of instructorships, and I was blessed in my previous departments to kind of climb the ranks quickly. But the big factor is I knew nothing of business, absolutely nothing. But I knew I had some expertise, and I thought I could share it. So when I started it, once again, I did what every prior military, every law enforcement, hey, I'm going to do safety consulting, I'm going to do training.
Yeah.
And now I have instructorships in tactical medicine, firearms, both state and federal levels, and CPR, first aid, and just a multitude of things. And I said, I'm just going to teach everything, not knowing that that's probably one of the slowest ways to grow a business. And once again, can't take any credit for it where we're at this point. I had a mentor that came to me and said, hey, what's the question you get asked the most? And I said, Probably how to become a police officer, because everyone knows that I was in law enforcement and that I was an instructor, and I've done the hiring processes and everything. And they said, why don't you just make content on that? So I literally titled it "How to Become a Police Officer," and I made a 20-minute video on that, and it blew up.
Wow.
From social media getting 10 views to 10,000 views.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and so what's funny is that the answer to stuff is sometimes staring you in the face and you can't see it, right? Like, and it took somebody like, hey, dude, like, you realize like you have this in front of you, and it's a basic one sentence question, right? And it's not something that the average person can. You can Wikipedia it, you can Google it, right? But there's nothing better than a living, breathing human being who's going to tell you exactly what you actually have to do to go through that. And then on the good side of it, you're going to attract people who have come in your field of work. They're like, yeah, man, this is exactly what you have to do. This is exactly what stage I was at in life. And then it becomes a community, and then it becomes an event. And now the ball kind of, quote unquote, gets rolling. And then you see there's a gap in the market for this.
Absolutely. I mean, we've carved out our own little niche, and we have other people popping up kind of doing some similar stuff now and other focuses. And I'm all for it. The big thing that we say over here is we're trying to, and I actually dislike this term, trying to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. I don't want the rich, and I say this all the time.
Right.
I want us standing on the same piece of land side by side. Right. And I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke and say there's no such thing as a bad police officer. No, my first arrest was a cop. The first person I ever arrested was a cop. And it was a DUI arrest. He had his sober wife and his 2 little girls in the back. Right. And trust me, the academy didn't prepare me for that. Right. And once again, good leadership. I had a supervisor come up to me and I said, because I was still on FTO, I was still in training. Yeah. And I said, what do you do with this? The academy didn't have anything like this. And he said, what would you do if it was any other person? That's awesome. And I was like, all right.
That's awesome.
And then since then, better FTOs, better training. And I said, man, if those help shape me and I feel like I was a good officer, maybe I can help shape a few others, and maybe I can make a small little impact on making the world a little bit better.
And the thing is about it too, is like your profession, because of, the amount of stress, the time away from the family, it's good to have an opportunity to have somebody to have you, because you guys consult with retirees and active law enforcement, having a young man or woman, transition literally from high school to say, hey, before you go into this path, let's get you some people who can guide you along the way to prepare you for certain scenarios. Because, like you said, there's nothing that was in the training book for that, or, I've seen stories where the mother is stealing, but she has starving kids at home. And there's the, yes, there's the law. And I say this respectfully, but there's also a woman with starving kids at home. And what's the quote unquote right thing to do, and what do you say?
I have a perfect situation for that. I was in the Park Service still working for them, and I get a call. I was just coming off 5 days in the backcountry, and I just got a call from our dispatch saying, "Hey, there seems to be a disturbance at this campground," which is where I was coming out of the woods at. Campground host says they're having an issue with someone over at this gazebo. And I go over there, and the campground host, now they're volunteers, but they take pride in their work, and they almost try to act like they own the campground sometimes and everything. But it's just because they take pride in it.
Right.
And he was upset that this lady was setting up, she laid out a full spread, a picnic spread for her and her 2 kids at this kind of gazebo pavilion thing. And he said, hey, this isn't rented. She's got to rent it. She's got to reserve it. And I said, okay, does anyone have it reserved for this time frame? And he said, no. And I was like, okay, can there no one use it? What's the deal? I mean, this is public property. Right. And so he's walking over there and he's just rambling to me. And once again, he's not meaning anything mean by it, but I'm like, hey, just go back to the host station. I'll handle it.
Yeah, right.
So I get there, and you can obviously tell her whole life is packed up in this car. It's just her with 2 little kids. Yeah. You can tell she's probably struggling in some aspect. And she saw me coming, obviously badge, gun on my side and everything. She's like, oh, we'll pack, because the host had already said something to her. We'll pack up. And I said, absolutely not. You got mind if I sit down and have lunch with you all? And I just sat down with her kids and had lunch. And that's exactly it. If law enforcement, some people know this term, some people don't. But law enforcement are always taught early on in their training. You have the letter of the law, which is the way the laws are written there. Then you have the spirit of the law. And The spirit of the law is,
Right.
why are you going to jam up somebody and write someone a ticket that's struggling and just trying to have a nice picnic with their kids
Yeah.
in one of the most beautiful national parks in the country?
Yeah, and the thing is about it is that with respect to the other individual, you don't know if they've had 5 days by themselves, and they had an issue that where they let it slide, and then there was reserve because maybe so there's different interpretations, but you made a judgment call with the woman to make herself make a better day, and I always like to hear stories like that too because those are the ones that are in the back page of social media rather than the front page of social media, so to speak, right? And
Yeah.
you didn't, you're not out tweeting about that you did that. It was just a human interaction.
Yeah, law enforcement is horrible with media. They are the worst with media.
Yeah. Just so I'm glad that you shared that story. So, what's the onboarding process like for somebody who's going to your consulting services? When they say they reach out, is it virtual? Is it in person? Like, let's dive a little into that without giving away too much of your secrets.
Yeah, so a lot of it's automated, thankfully, with technology, as you learn and you grow. So a lot of it's automated. We have a couple things where people can sign up for a couple free trainings. We have a free workshop, right? It's a prior recording that also has some additional bonuses in it, like a practice written exam and everything. So they can go through, watch that, and then I'll break down every step of the hiring process that are typically out there. Right. And I go kind of in the order that it typically goes, but every department is always a little bit different.
Right.
So that we have that. And then we also offer coaching calls, initial coaching calls for individuals. Now, when someone comes in, depending on how they come in, if they come in for the training webinar, the recorded training webinar, they'll come in, they'll go through, and then they'll get, obviously we'll email to them, hey, here's a couple additional things to think about. And then now since in the last month or two, we've since took away our online course as a standalone product, and we actually combined it into our community and online course access. So now they get access to a community and Monday calls with me. So 30-minute Monday calls with me where they can come in, ask any question they want. And that's kind of a new program, and that's the only thing that they can self-register for.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Anything other than that, if they want, we have another thing that's called a group coaching community or group coaching product. That one in itself, we call it group coaching, but you're still assigned a primary instructor. You have your own primary instructor that you're able to message whenever you want. There's no limitations. And you can even still sign up for private calls with them, pending their availability, right? Whatever availability they have and everything like that. And then we have our one-on-one coaching where you sign up with the instructor for one-on-one coaching, and we're coaching you until one of two things happen. You get hired, or you tell us you no longer want to pursue law enforcement. Yeah. We don't really accept option number two.
Yeah. Well, and that's good because listen, if somebody's willing to get some coaching to get into your field of work, that means they're already, I would like to say 90% serious, and they just have that I don't want to even say self-doubt, be like, I'm scared of what I don't know, and I don't want to get to an academy and then really because I read some of the testimonies where, it's a nerve-wracking experience, having to go through psychological exams. And I had the pleasure one time of talking to a former Secret Service agent who also was in the military as well, too, and people are like, they the TV shows don't do justice to what people actually have to go through, to do certain things. And I'm like, listen, man, he's a big guy, and, a guy like that, grilling you can make you, shaking your boots a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, anything from an intimidation factor to, most people have never done a board or panel interview with 3 to 6 people sitting across from them that have every bit of training for interrogation and intimidation out there, right? And then on top of it, then you have a polygraph. You have to be willing to share every deep and dark secret you have in your background, right? So, and then on top of it, that once it's out there forever. So if you ever have to go to court for a big case, any defense attorney can subpoena that information and then can throw it out in your face in the middle of court in front of everybody.
I do have a question though. How does social media hinder future recruits in law enforcement? Because there's a certain like a 15-year-old kid that got a chance to get their first cell phone and is going on their cussing spree.
It didn't affect them. Oh my! 100% will affect them if they post underage drinking photos, right? Yeah. Or if they post anything with an illegal substance. You post something with improper handling of a firearm. Post a disparaging comment against ethnicity, anything like that. Of course, anything political. That's one of the social media flags. Anything profanity. That's a social media flag.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
Everything.
So here you are, 13, 14, and you got to realize that 10 years from now, for people who are listening, it's real. It's real, and think twice before what you put out there.
If I was a university that had a criminal justice program and I was getting an 18-year-old, and even then it's a little late potentially now with how young kids are getting cell phones. The first class I would make them take is social media etiquette.
Without question. Yeah, and it's crazy because again, that's not something the previous generation ever had to actually deal with, right? It's a brand new. How far back do you go? How much do you blame on a youthful discretion? And then the other thing about it is too, and I can only say this from the outside looking in, how much recruits does that take out of the pool?
A lot.
Right. So now you're looking at it a situation where you have a large number of people who are retiring or at near retirement age. Or you sit back and say, I have 100 vacancies to fill, but 80 of them have something on social media from when they were a ninth grader, and now I have to take that out of the pool of the equation. So, that's a difficult situation to assess.
Yeah, and we say it all the time. Time and distance makes every hurdle smaller. So if you're a 35-year-old applicant and you underage drank till you were 21, you have roughly 14 years of separation from that. It's understandable as long as you have a good history, recently in the last 14 years, they're willing to move past that.
Right.
If you just turned 21 and you underage drank till you were 21, you're disqualified.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, where's the double standard? Well, because we have nothing else to compare you to other than your recent illegal activity. Now, the 35-year-old, he or she has their own hurdles.
Right.
They have to remember every place they've ever lived since they were either 15 or their entire life.
Yes.
Every place they've worked, they need coworkers for that. Your supervisor, everything like that. So if you were a younger candidate, you're saying, oh, that's not fair. If you're older, you have more time in separation. Well, yeah, but if you're younger, you also have less history that you have to put down.
Question.
And if you forget to put down something on history or you make a mistake on it, that's another disqualifying factor. So if I leave off a place of employment that I worked when I was 16 because I'm 42 now and I'm applying for law enforcement, I'm finally chasing my dream, and I leave off my 16-year-old employment, I can be DQ'd for that, for omission.
At the end of the day, it's your job to do all your research on yourself. And it's crazy because you may have forgot about the ice cream stand you worked at when you were, all I can say is that people really need to be thorough about themselves, because if it's as stringent as you say that it is, it's for a particular reason, right? And they obviously need a full picture of who you are as a person. I do have a question about your consulting service, because while you were talking about all those things, do you guys have anybody that's like a bilingual course? Like, hey, because, you just don't know, right? Maybe somebody speaks Spanish, maybe somebody, maybe that's something you offer.
I have not run into that issue, and we've helped individuals in multiple different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So we predominantly work out of North America. Yeah. We have a few clients up in Canada. We're all over the U.S., but we've helped individuals in Australia. We've helped individuals in South Africa,
amazing.
Germany, and then England too. Yeah. So we've had a bit. But here's the thing: that because we're mostly operating out of North America, I haven't ran into that issue for this one fact. Usually the standard, every department says you must speak English.
Okay. See, I don't know that.
So even if you were and we help a lot of bilingual individuals and even people who are ESL, English is their second language.
Gotcha.
Some of the things that we work on is actually their pronunciation and their articulation of English. Yes. So we work on that a lot with some of our ESL members. Yeah. But because that's the standard, I've never looked at it from another perspective.
Okay.
Because I haven't really ran into that as an issue yet.
Okay.
But I can see if we do work in other countries where Spanish or another language is a predominant language, I could see that being something we'd need to look into.
It's like, again, like I said, I just can't speak, like I said, this is all foreign to me, but I'm like, hey, you never know if like maybe that opens up. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't have the predominantly English language of the academy, but it's like, hey, we do have bilingual candidates because there are areas that may be more receptive to somebody who can, or people who just don't speak English, so.
No, we are. Yeah. If you're bilingual, you get additional points towards your hiring.
Yeah,
the more languages you fluently speak and write, the better a candidate you are. But at the end of the day, the one of the hiring requirements is proper ability to speak and write English.
For sure. Now, when you're dealing with law enforcement and you have your academy, have you ever expanded? Again, this is just my personal own curiosity. has it ever gone just beyond like, hey, prepare for academy? Do police officers have to deal with like, some sort of biomedical or anything outside of traditional, like, hey, somebody could have like a chemical in their house and there's a special situation for that particular avenue, not just a traditional,
We don't.
anything of that nature.
We haven't found ourselves expanding out too much into advanced training. Is kind of what you're sounding like there. We do expand. Yeah, we do expand. So we mostly focus on academy or excuse me, department hiring, prep, and recruitment.
Okay.
And then we expand into academy because you could go through the entire hiring process, fail the academy, and then you're done. You've lost your job. And most times another department will never touch you ever again unless you self-sponsor and pass the academy, if that's even allowed in your state, because it costs average nationwide. You're looking at roughly $200 and some $1,000 to get a brand new applicant from application to off FTO, which is their field training. That's what it costs to get a new officer.
One
certified to be out there patrolling by one new officer.
Gosh.
Between salary, training, compensation packages like insurance, everything like that, to get one officer actually out there ready to patrol and be able to handle a shift where another officer doesn't need to be with them, somewhere around $200,000.
That's insane. I mean, that is, for a small town, that's a budget buster.
Huge investment. Yeah, huge investment. Right? And it varies depending on where you live and everything like that. Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that it's just not. That's why turnover is so bad for a department. If they have a turnover issue, that's one of the things they need to fix immediately. But no, so then we after the academy, then you have FTO.
Right.
And this is unknown to a lot of people. You can, even with all that money invested, you can wash out at FTO, because if you can't get on board with you learn the academy, you pass the academy, that's your basic, but then you got to apply those training skills in real life. And if you can't get past officer safety, or you are violating someone's constitutional rights, and we can't fix that and train that, even that $210,000 or $200,000 is way cheaper than a lawsuit.
Right.
Or you getting hurt and losing your life or something like that because you're not good on officer safety.
Of course.
So, yeah, people wash out all the way through FTO too.
I mean, I say this very respectfully. It's for a certain group of individuals, right? And that same thing applies, I can imagine with the Navy SEAL, there are going to be a lot of people that, come from good, hearty places and with the right intentions, but eventually it weeds out the like anything that has a standard of excellence. It's going to weed out a large group of people, and then they hope to get the best of the best, because that's what's required of those positions, mentally, physically, emotionally, and that's not even including their own personal life that they have to juggle on the back end while doing all of those things. That's just the job itself.
Yeah, and you're going to see the best of what the world and society and humans, the human psyche has to offer. You're also going to see the worst of it. So that's kind of where it goes. But ultimately, in my humble opinion, I think it's one of the most rewarding positions in the world.
For sure.
Financially, you can support your family. It's one of the last jobs out there that has a real pension. Like, you can actually retire and feel safe and secure with health care and with benefits and compensation. So, yeah, I think it's great.
You know what? I'm just thinking of this. Maybe in future plans, you hook up with people that want to do fire department, stuff like that, right? That would be,
You're the third person that said that to me this week.
Just keeping it real. I'm like, you know what, man?
No, I mean, we might have to look into it at this point.
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be, and I'm not saying my show is the biggest thing in the world, but there's somebody who at some point is going to talk to you, or I would hope they'll be like, man, I think the same principles could apply to firefighters. You're onto something here, and I'll leave that up to you. You're smarter than me on this topic, but I just think that would be a great preparation tool, because again, a lot of those people that were born between 1950 and 65 are retiring, right? And so, it's just the straight up truth. And even like up to 1970, respectively, right? So there's a new generation where they could utilize services like yours, because maybe those people aren't available to talk to, and they can relate to someone like yourself, who's close in age, who's tech savvy, who can navigate those same principles and situations that they're going through as that young 18-year-old kid. I was born in 82. When somebody tells me they were born in 2002 or 2003, I'm like,
I know.
Like, oh, like, what? Like, I graduated from high school.
My oldest daughter was born in 2021. My youngest daughter was born in 2024.
Yeah, and you're trying to wrap your head around like that type of situation,
Uh-huh.
right? And so, you're just like, seriously? Like, and so, I could go on for days about, like, I'm like, I'll joke with somebody. I'm like, do you know who like Tupac is? And, like, I just have to ask, like,
Not at all. Yeah.
you
I'm like, I still remember listening to stuff on cassettes and then like buying those
yes.
CDs for my friends for their birthdays
Yes.
and everything like that.
And, well, you know what? In all seriousness, though, it's like a loss. Like, you lose the social interaction, because when you did go to the record store, when you did go to a Blockbuster, like when you didn't have to order a pizza through an app and you actually had to go, and like that's how you met, talked, learned, and interacted, right? Now that's gone.
I know. I was just sitting at the diner this morning before we jumped on this. I was at our new training center and I stopped by the diner next door. And then my neighbors came in, and they're snowbirds, and they travel, back and forth across the state between their two houses. And I ran into them, and I was thinking the same thing. I mean, this is such a lost art at this point in time.
It really is. It really is. And so I'm like I said, man, when I got your email and I got a chance to go to your website, I kind of stopped in my tracks a bit. So I'm like, man, he can drop some nuggets of knowledge. That this is why I made this show, right? Because I think that the world owes information like this, and this is just the epitome of why I decided to take this path. And I would love, to do a shameless plug. Where can people find Frank McGaha, Armogan Consulting, all the things that you're doing, because this is all about you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm gonna caveat real quick with while I'm very humbled by the accomplishments I've been able to complete. Once again, those were all thanks to good leaders and mentorship, and so that's all I'm trying to do. Is kind of pay that back. But if you want to reach out to us, you can find us on any of our social platforms. It's usually under Armogan Training, or you could go over to our website, armoganct.com, and then you'll be able to see any free trainings we have coming up, any of our live webinars, or be able to get to any of our socials. And we're putting out new content every single day of the week.
I can only imagine that this is going to be a very global force with what you have, because you clearly identified something and the ball is rolling for you. And this has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you as a guest. And I'm looking forward to further communication with you as well.
It was truly mine. I appreciate you having me on.
Frank McGaha on the Randomness of Nothing podcast, your host, Rashad Woods. If you like more, hit subscribe, and make sure you guys reach out to Frank if you have an interest in law enforcement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Man,